Hi there, welcome to the Raven's Call. I'm Eric Wordweaver Sjerven, Gothi of the Ridgar folk here in East Texas, and I would like to welcome you to the show. This is a program where I ramble on about different heathen-related subjects, just kind of whatever strikes my fancy, sets my mind on fire at the time. Big UPG warning at the beginning of these things. This is just how I see heathenry. This is my viewpoints and my expression, my experience based on research and personal experience and insights. And you get a healthy dose of both when you're dealing with me. And so, take that for what it is. It's not necessarily representative of greater heathenry. I am not the expert. I am not the end-all be-all. I'm simply an expert on my heathenry, how I do heathenry. And you folks seem to find it interesting, so I keep doing these. But take that as it is. Establish your own heathenry. Do your own research. Establish your own traditions. These are just meant to be thought-provoking and to establish maybe conversations and things like that. So make of it what you will. All the contact information is down below. Please hit subscribe if you haven't yet. Ding the bell for notifications, all that. Hit thumbs up on the videos if you enjoy them. Comment, interact, all that fun stuff. Join the Facebook group so you can be part of the conversation. Networking is great over there, so jump in there. Feel free to set up like Zoom meetings or something if there's somebody on the list in your area. Hit them up, send them a message, say, hey, you want to meet up over Zoom? That's as simple as it gets. You can get some face-to-face talk. You can talk for a couple hours. You can talk for a couple minutes. And if the person ends up being dodgy, you can just disconnect the call. So it's an idea. You know, that's COVID thinking in the modern age. Why not? So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's subject. This is one that has been born from viewer requests, and there's too many individuals tied to it for me to give one specific reference, one specific shout out on this one. So. But this is the question that's come up a number of times, both in personal conversations and in comments and stuff, all over the place. What do I need in order to get started in heathenry? What kind of things do I need? Because there's kind of a misconception. If you look at well-established tribes who have had time to gather items, who have had time to build altars, to build halls, there's kind of a misconception that you need all of these trappings in order to start practicing heathenry. Okay? There's a misconception that you have to do all of the research before you start practicing, that you have to become an expert and a scholar before you even begin the process of being heathen. It's not like that, okay? You will never stop researching. You will never stop learning, at least not if you're interested in growth. So you just need enough to get started, which is not all of it. Okay, I get a lot of requests for like reading lists and whatnot. Here's the problem with reading lists, guys. I don't particularly like the intro books, okay? There's not an intro book that I can kick at you to say, here is something that you need in order to get started on heathenry. I don't like those. A lot of the things that I consider essential reading are advanced subjects. They're things like We Are Our Deeds, by Eric Wodening. That is a book that I feel is important for understanding heathen ethics and values. It also reads like Korean stereo instructions. It's dry, and it's definitely an academic piece. It is not, there's no narrative, there's no characters to follow. It's not like the lore where you can follow the tales of the gods and then traditions are interwoven in there through the deeds and actions and stuff like that. It's a straight up academic piece. But it studies linguistics, it studies where people placed value on ethics and morals based on the words that they used and the presence of certain words and the roots of words. It's a great read. I consider it an essential for anybody who's looking at doing deeper thought into the heathen worldview. But intro stuff is killer because so many things in the intro world, established heathens don't write intro stuff for the most part. Established heathens usually write more advanced subjects. You'll find blog posts up about, various and sundry intro things like, how do I do a blow? What's the calendar like? I know there's some individuals on the internet where the calendar is like their driving force, and that's the main thing that they talk about all the time. So you can find a plethora of things online just with a simple search. You can jump on some of these Facebook groups and you can come across some really cool source materials. It's a stumble on it kind of thing. It's not always real clean and crisp and easy, and you're just as likely to get bad info as you are to get good info. And that's something that you only learn through time, is how to pick the chaff from the wheat. You will eventually understand when you look at something, oh, that's crap, I don't need to pay attention to that. But it's not something I can necessarily ingrain in you guys in a video here. For instance, an excellent source of introductory stuff is Our Troth, published by The Troth. Kveldolf Gunderson is the guy that is the main editor on it, and the main author and editor. But even then, it's got some good historical elements. It's got some introductory stuff to the gods and to traditions, and some of the esoteric magical stuff, as well as some of the religious stuff and the spiritual stuff. But then, in the same, there's as many bad things about it as I can say good things about it. Yes, there's some really good information in there. There's also some really bad information in there. It's definitely, as far as from my particular standpoint, my particular tradition. And that's where you get down to it. It's hard to do an intro to heathenry kind of thing when the tribal differences can be very, very wide. So a good intro source material for someone, for their tribe, may be horrible information for another tribe, because that's not how they do things. This tribe may have more of an Asatru bent, and this tribe may be more tribalist in nature, and therefore the two don't mix. The source materials for an Anglo-Saxon heathen is going to be significantly different than the source materials for a Norse Icelandic pagan heathen. So it varies, like Anglo-Saxons will throw out Lady with a Mead Cup as an essential read. Again, an advanced read, not an intro thing. But it is essential because it explores in depth some of the cultural norms surrounding specifically Anglo-Saxon heathenry, as well as like Sumbul and things like that. There's a lot more to the book too. 2 sentences is not enough to sum it up. But it's an essential read, and still Norse Icelandic heathens can take stuff from that book. It's not like that's just an English or Anglo-Saxon kind of thing, but that's where the main focus, if it makes sense, I don't know. Anyway, source materials are janky that way. So what do I need to start? Man, that's tough. That is a tough one. That's the reason I haven't put out a reading list yet. People ask me for reading lists all the time, and I keep saying, I'm working on that. I'm going to come back to it, and then I rack my brain about it a bit, and I'm like, I can tell you to read the sagas. I can tell you to read the Eddas. I can tell you to read, the Poetic Edda especially. A lot of the key stories exist in Sturluson's Prose Edda, but if you don't understand heathenry enough to know where he's syncretizing and where he's just making stuff up, then stories can be very misleading. A lot of things that I find to be essential for heathenry are not intro level things. Pop culture will take care of introduction to things like the gods and to some of the general cultural aesthetics, but this isn't like going in and learning math. This isn't like going in and learning a language where it's like, all right, we're going to start with the building blocks here and we're going to develop here. You're talking about passing on and delving into and exploring an entire culture. And even that is too broad a term, because heathenry itself is not a culture. Heathenry is a broad term that's slapped on top of multiple individual cultures within. Each hearth has its own specific culture. Each tribe has its own culture. So you've got a tribal culture, and then you can have individual hearth cultures within that. And what they value, what's important to them, is going to be different. A lot of people will read Diana Paxson's stuff. Paxson's a great author, does some really cool stuff. More on the Asatru side of things than necessarily heathen side of things, generalized heathenry, because there are some heavy neo-pagan influences in some areas, but still there's some good source material there. Some specific insights, at least. I've read a number of Paxson's books. They are ones to newbies that I'll say, all right, well, you can read this, like Essential Asatru by Diana Paxson. Asatru. But still, it's an intro thing. It's a chance to... There is some really good information in there. There's some information in there that I don't agree with. That's going to happen. That happens with everything, pretty much. And so it's not easy for me to boil that down, okay? So, what do I need to start practicing heathenry? You just need to establish some study of the gods. study the gods and get to know the gods a little bit. There's multiple sources that you can do that from. The Eddas and the Sagas are a good way to do that. The Sagas can be a bit more advanced, so it's not necessarily something that's necessary for beginning, but there's some really good stuff you can get from the Sagas. But like, I wouldn't say the Saga of the Laxerdal people is going to be an essential thing for somebody practicing heathenry. There's some great stuff in Egil Skallagrimsson, but it's not necessarily essential for starting heathenry. Same thing with the Saga of Burnt Jarl. Some good stuff, but not necessarily essential for heathenry. There's some essential stuff for advanced heathenry, but not necessarily introductory heathenry. So, I just don't... there's not a good book to say, here, intro to heathenry, read this, this is where you start. Read everything you can. Read everything you can, and then you'll begin over time to start to figure things out. You have to figure out where you stand as far as whether you're a Reconstructionist heathen, whether you're a modernist heathen, whether you're Asatru, whether you're tribal, whatever. And again, I'll do a video on the different types of heathenry here coming up. That's a big daunting task, and so I just haven't done it yet, and I don't have enough sleep in me at the moment to jump onto that one today. So, reading list aside, read whatever you can, and definitely focus on the god stories, because that's how we learn about the gods and we get to establish the gods. Read about different religion, different traditions, different things to pass along, and then figure out where you stand. Go from there. So I'll revisit book references and things like that in the near future. Okay. Now, what do I need material-wise to start practicing? Essentially nothing. The gist of going out and doing a bloat. Yes, we've got some really advanced stuff as far as different ritual items, the use of different metals within a ritual space, establishing ritual space, boundaries, things like that. We have a number of ritual items that we use within our tribe because we are honing in our traditions. We are honing in our ritual structure in a way that really, really works for our tribe and is very effective. We get good results. That is the benefit of years and years of work. Okay? When I started out with a coffee cup that was passed down from my grandfather, a microwave stand that I used as an altar, and a couple of baubles and trinkets and hammers and stuff like that I picked up over time. Even those are not necessary. To practice heathenry, all you have to do is start being heathen. Start thinking about things from a heathen worldview. If you want source material on heathen worldview, watch the rest of my videos. I'm not going to point you to somebody else's stuff. I'm going to say, just watch the rest of my videos, and you'll get an idea of where I'm going with some of the different things. Think about the fact that we are our deeds. Start thinking about religious and spiritual and cultural elements within your world, and start thinking about the shift in worldview from the more modernized Western view of the world to a heathen worldview, which is significantly different in some key points. Those are things that you need. Material objects, not nearly as important. Yes, you will want to establish those early on, but as far as starting out, you really don't need it. You don't need a rune set to do ritual. You don't necessarily have to have an ornate bloat bowl to do ritual. If you think about doing bloat, at least in the feigning sense of modern bloat, the way that we do it, short of animal sacrifice, but like if you're going to go out and offer mead to the gods kind of thing, all right, we'll use that as an example. You literally need a bottle of mead and then something to catch it in order to do the blessing back, because you'll have the mead that you have. You don't have to have an alternate vessel to put it in. You don't have to have a horn to pour the meat into, to offer it to the gods, and then a bowl to catch it, and then to sprinkle it on the folk. You can, literally, if you have none of that, and you let's say you're, on duty in Afghanistan, or you're over in the sandbox or something, and you need to do a ritual, but you have no ritual items, you can get a bottle of beer, a good bottle of beer, which is the best that you've got accessible to you at the time, or if you've got a good setup, you can get a good bottle of wine, or you can get a good bottle of mead if you're lucky and find it, or spirits. It can be the whiskey that you have. You can literally take the bottle, hold it up to the gods, hail the gods, make offering, pour out the offering bit, and then if you're doing it for a group, pour a little bit out on your hand and do the blessing that way. Yes, there is the traditional form of the bloat bowl, the tang, all of that. There are reasons for those traditions. Those things are good, and they're things to work towards, but they're not, you don't have to have them to start out. Those are goals to work towards. The mistake that I see a lot of intro heathens do is they feel like they need to instantly jump into a well-established tribe. They need to jump into and suddenly be this multi-generational heathen with tons of traditions and tons of ritual items and tons of thu. And it's not going to be that way when you're first starting out, especially if you're a solitary practitioner and you don't have the benefit of jumping into a pre-existing tribe. If you do have the benefit of jumping into a pre-existing tribe, then my recommendation is learn from that tribe. Learn how they do things, learn why they do things, continue to do your independent research, continue to learn on anything that you can, but learn hands-on from them why they do the things they do. It's going to be very formative and will probably influence the way you do things from then on. But it's not necessarily going to dictate how you do things from then on. Just in case it doesn't work out with that particular tribe, you will still have some experience doing bloat and doing stumble the way that they did it, and you can continue to hone in what's important to you and why it's important to you and how to go about that in the future. Okay? So, yes, ultimately in the long run, you want to work towards having dedicated ritual items because it does help to hone in the ritual and make the ritual more effective. Having a dedicated bloat bowl, having a dedicated ritual horn for stumble or for making offerings to the gods, having an established altar with all of the different symbolism and trinkets and totems on it that you want. That's something you build up over time. It doesn't have to happen instantaneously. Don't go out and break the bank feeling that you've got to have these things to be heathen. Hey, Odin. It is okay to start with nothing and work from there. You can be an established heathen with all of these ritual items, but find yourself in a situation where you don't have access to anything. See again, soldiers overseas that don't have access to ritual items or ornate setups. You don't have to have an altar. You can stand out in the middle of a field and address the gods directly. You do not need to have a go-between between you and the gods. This isn't, the church. We're not talking about a Catholic setup where you have to go through a priest. Within Heathenry, the priest class is just a skilled class. They're good at ritual. They're not your go-between between the tribe and the gods. What they are is they're a craftsman at the religious. They are good at building ritual. They are good at running ritual and running an effective ritual. You can go through and do your own ritual and all this stuff. You don't have to have somebody else to do it. Is it beneficial to have a craftsman who's really good at it in order to get really good results? Yes, absolutely. Can you make amateur stuff work? Absolutely. Absolutely. You got to start somewhere, and it's okay to start somewhere. It's okay to start with nothing and build from there. Okay? It's your heathenry. It's the way you do things. And so, as far as ritual items go, you don't have to have anything. If I was to give a starter set, I wouldn't even say bare minimum, just a starter set. Something that, if I was to gift somebody something for ritual, all right, here you go. This is, you can run a basic ritual with this without any problem. Like I said, you don't have to have it. You can just have the bottle of whatever you're offering, make the offering, talk to the gods, accept the offering, and you're good from a basic level. If I was going to give them something that I'm like, all right, well, this is a way to hone in your initial craft and at least give you a leg up, because that ritual is going to be the whole just you, nothing but the bottle out there in the field. It's going to be a raw ritual. It's going to be effective, but it may not necessarily be as effective as if you've got all this other stuff to help hone that in. In some ways, it may be more effective depending on the situation, especially when you're talking about combat situations and it's in the raw, that the field of battle is your altar at that point. It's a completely different setup, a completely different thing. But, so you don't necessarily have to have a hogr or an altar or something if you're in the field of battle, because that is holy ground to Odin and to Thor and Tyr and the more battle-oriented gods and goddesses. So, if I was to give this set, just a starter set, I would probably gift somebody a bowl for a bloat bowl, for an offering bowl, and a horn. Maybe a knife to dedicate to ritual purposes for the purpose of cutting up ritual offerings and for harvesting bloatanes from a nearby pine tree or cedar tree or whatever you have available. I usually like to use evergreen conifers simply because the tane, it works better as a tane. Can you do it with an oak branch with oak leaves on it? Sure you can. It's not going to be as effective in the pragmatic sense of spreading the meat around as a blessing kind of thing as the wispy whiskey kind of element of the needles on a conifer, but that's just from personal preference and experience, okay? Do you have to have, would I even include runes in that initial set? No, I wouldn't, because if you don't know how to use the runes, if you haven't taken the time to learn the runes, which is a long process, they're going to be useless to you in a ritual initially. I would not consider that a starter item. I would consider that a more advanced item as far as being able to use it effectively in a ritual. So that wouldn't even make it into my set. I might include an altar cloth, simply because, and it would probably be a pretty rugged altar cloth because you don't necessarily have to have a dedicated altar. You have to, at most, it would probably be a rough cloth, a strong cloth that they could use and like spread out on the ground to be able to do their offerings if they wanted to, or set on a stone in the yard kind of thing, or a tree stump in the yard kind of thing to make a makeshift altar. Or they could spread out on a card table, or they could spread out on a microwave stand, which is what I started on. You know, I literally would get up in the morning, make my offerings to my ancestors in this cup that I inherited from my grandfather, which is a really cool cup. It says skull with a troll, and it's got a couple of Norwegian trolls on there. Inherited it from my grandpa. Love it. It's a fantastic cup, and I still use it on my ancestor altar today. I started out with one altar. That I honored the gods and goddesses, my ancestors, and my husvatir all on the same altar. As I developed as a heathen, I broke those altars up into multiple altars. And actually, when I first started out, I didn't have an altar. I was working out in the field and just doing what I did because I was, not established in my own space yet at that time. So I just kind of worked with what I had and rolled from it from there. So this is something that you can do. You can build a temporary altar. You can build a mobile altar, an altar that's transportable. You can work without an altar. I find the altar to be more essential in the long run, just as far as establishing that conduit between the profane and the sacred. But you can establish sacred space and set up boundaries simply by walking off a space. You can go around and be like, all right, I'm establishing the sacred space. This is the boundary for my ritual. Do the thing. I mean, it borrows heavily, in that sense, it borrows heavily from like casting the circle, but it's not as far as from a neo-pagan side of things. But essentially you're doing the same thing. You're establishing wards around an established space and declaring the inside sacred. It's a little different because in the neo-pagan sense of things, it's more on the spiritual side of things as far as the ward goes, a little more profane world elements when you're casting the circle, as it were. But when you're establishing a ritual space, when you're establishing a holy stead, you set the purpose specifically to be, this is the conduit between the profane and the sacred. And so you can do that. You just walk off an area, establish your space, make your offering, and go. If you're dealing with the Vatir, if you're honoring local land whites, you don't necessarily need that. When my first chieftain and I were out in the woods and we were honoring the local land spirits of the sloughs where we were hunting, we didn't need to establish a sacred space because we're dealing with spirits in the profane world. We just simply said, hey, here's your offering, and we're just trying to build a relationship. Please let us hunt here. Bless us with a harvest. And so we built that relationship over time. He mostly built that relationship because he lived down in that space, but I jumped in there and helped out where I could, and when I was up visiting and we were hunting together. But spend some time to get to know the spirits and things like that. Establish your relationship, get your permission to hunt the area, and you'll find that your bounty increases as a result. And it's definitely true for him because he got to see patterns out there in the land and the migratory patterns of the animals and whatnot, that he had good bounty from that land. He knew that land. He knew how to hunt it. And man, it was good. It was good. So as far as like establishing with like a husvatir altar, like if you're going to have the presence of a husvatir altar, which I highly recommend. If I was going to say start out with anything, I would say establish with the gods and goddesses, and establish with your husvatir, and establish with your ancestors. Okay, those are the big three that I would say mainly focus on. We've talked a little bit about on the gods side. Read what you can, study what you can, make offerings how you can with what you have, and then build altar over time. You don't necessarily have to have a husvatir altar, house spirit altar, hearth god altar, in order to honor your hearth god, your husvatir. You can literally set up something that is their totem, their focus, and you can have it on the kitchen counter. You can have it on a shelf in the corner. I recommend having it somewhere tied to what you view as kind of the hearth, the heart of your homestead, whether that be your living room or your kitchen, dining room. I recommend something with a view of the main living area where they can be involved in and witness to the life of the house. You don't want them to feel put away in a corner and tucked away in a closet kind of thing. You want them to be part of the family and part of the experience of living this space. Okay, so if I was to gift somebody in that starter set, a bloat bowl and a horn and maybe a knife for the bloat ritual for the gods and goddesses, for the husvatir, I might gift them a little like gnome house, or a little garden gnome house, or a little fairy house that they could use as the repository for their husvatir, their hearth god. Or I might gift them a little garden gnome statue, not one of the like big garden gnomes that you would set out in the garden, but like the really cool like fairy garden gnome statues that you can get. I have a ton of them on my husvatir altar. The main one that is the epicenter for my hearth gods, and then we have two, and then some other ones there to represent kind of their folk. And then we've established over the years a ton of stuff on our hearth god altar that's just really cool, and it's us, it's our family, and it's representative of our relationship with our hearth gods. So make of that what you will. But I might gift them something like that. Even then, I'm not sure that's something I would include in a gift set, simply because that's something that's very personal and they need to pick it out themselves. But as far as, starter items, if I was to be building a, starter heathenry item, that would be a thing, and then something for the ancestor altar, the honoring of the ancestors. That's simple. Family pictures of the deceased, the dearly departed, great-grandparents, grandparents, stuff like that. Parents, if you're unfortunate enough to have lost your parents at this point. Just fallen family members in a space where you go to honor them. Does it have to be an altar? No, it can be a collage on the wall. It can be a family photo album that you set in a honored space to show respect. And then you go and you pay your respect to it. These things the pictures help to create that emotional tie, to kind of kickstart that piece of your psyche, to connect to your weird and your orlog, to tie to those ancestors. The most effective thing you can do in honoring your ancestors is to visit the gravesite and to make offering at the gravesite. But I realize that's not always easily accessible or feasible. If you have, if they've been immolated as opposed to inhumated, inhumation is the burial. Immolation, of course, is cremation. If they've been cremated, then you may go to the ancestors' ashes and give offering there. You may place the ancestors' ashes on a prominent point in your altar and honor them there. If you've got a family grave site area, mausoleum type thing, then you can go there. It just depends. The most effective thing you can do is just visit the grave site and make offering and connections there. Short of that, you can make the connections at the altar and then tie through, because it's the spiritual plane. The physical proximity is most effective, but you can still connect through that spiritual plane to make that connection, get it there. So what do I need to start? I keep repeating because that's the title. That's what we're doing. What do I need to start? I just need some way to honor the gods and goddesses. I need some way to honor my ancestors. And I need to establish a relationship with my hearth god. You don't even need a tribe to start. You don't need a kindred to start. Start now. Don't wait and become an expert. Don't wait and study everything under the sun in order to become pro-heathen and to get pro-heathen status. Just start doing. Go out today. Go out today and pour out an offering to the gods. If you don't have a tie to a specific god, just pour out an offering to the gods in general, or set some food out. Do those kind of things. Just start doing, because the study will only get you so far. Okay? You can study everything that is heathen. You can conceptually and theoretically understand everything that is heathen, but unless you're actually out doing it, you're not really heathen. Heathenry is for the doers, the ones that get up and do things. You can have a scholar who knows everything there is to know about a specific culture and time, the cultural norms, etc., etc., etc. But if they don't go out and honor the gods, if they don't go out and honor their ancestors, I'm going to feel like they're less of a heathen than the guy who knows just enough to do an offering and to honor his ancestors, and he's just slogging through. He may be some blue-collar guy who is doing an offering to Thor, and who has a spot on his coffee table set up for his great-grandparents and his grandparents and stuff like that. That's heathenry. That's doing. He's actually doing something. There are heathen scholars that I respect that study and do these things, but they're also doers. They're the ones that are actually practicing heathenry, actually doing heathenry. That's the trick. So, what do I need to start being a heathen? To start practicing heathen, you just need to start. Just go out and do it. Get out there and start forging your connections. If you don't know how to, if you don't know the specifics, that's okay. That is okay. It is okay to start somewhere. It is okay not to know yet, because that means you have a direction to go. All right? Do not feel intimidated. Do not feel like you aren't worthy yet to honor the gods, like you have to prove yourself to honor the gods. No. Just go out and start honoring them. Go out and pour out an offering to the gods, whether it be of libation or if it's just your coffee. I started out sharing my morning coffee with the gods. I would pour an offering out to them, do my own. Today I still keep that tradition up with my hearth gods and my ancestors. I do bigger stuff for the gods and goddesses, but I do still maintain tradition of sharing my coffee in the morning with the housewites and with my ancestors. That's just a thing I do. My own personal hearth culture. And so just start doing. Just start experimenting. Start exploring. And you'll get there. It'll take time. It's fine. It's supposed to. This is not something where you go out and you do a master's class in this and then all of a sudden you're licensed to be a heathen. It's not like that. You are going to be searching forever. You're going to be learning forever. This is a culture. It is a worldview. It is a pathway, and you are constantly traversing. You're constantly doing, and that's a good thing. Enjoy the journey. Do not feel like, I don't want to do this because I don't want to do it wrong. It is better to take action and it be the wrong action than to take no action at all. Think that through. Action is better than inaction. Whether that action is true, like good and right, or wrong, you at least did something, You at least did something. You can learn from that. If you don't do anything, then you can't learn from it. So that's where do I start? That's where I start. Read what you can. Get your hands on what you can. Find all the sources you can. Read everything. There's some specific authors I would stay away from, but I'm not going to put those out because that's just going to start a flame war on here, and it's not worth it. Because some people really value these authors, and I think they're crap. So I would not. When I'm in personal conversations with people, I'm like, no, don't listen to that one. Don't read that one. It's horrible. Don't touch it. I will go so far as to say, if you're studying the runes, take the book by Ralph Bloom and throw it out the window. It's absolute crap. Don't touch it. And then don't read anything by DJ Conway as far as heathenry goes. Neo-paganry, yeah, you're fine, but it's straight Wicketry stuff as far as his Norse magic and heathenry stuff. Don't read DJ Conway. Not worth it. Bad source. So anyway, there's others, but I'm not going to get into those right now. So, what do you need? Read, study, talk to people. Talk to other heathens. Connect where you can. Online is fine, but don't try to establish a tribe online. Tribe needs to be in person, face to face. Don't feel like you got to get pressed into a tribe right away. Do not feel like that. That can come later. Focus on your hearth first. Focus on finding your way, and then you can establish into a hearth and into a tribe. If you can kind of follow along, if you find an established tribe and you like the way they do things, then you can be a guest and a visitor to their space and kind of learn from them how they do it, and then maybe use that to develop your own. But if you don't have a strong hearth culture when you try to join a tribe, I'm not sure what you're going to be bringing to the tribe. At that point, you're taking from the tribe, but I'm not sure what you're feeding back in. Not to say that it can't be a good thing. It can be a good thing. But for the most part, you need to really focus on your heathenry and your hearth culture first. Hearth culture is paramount. Hearth culture. So start establishing your hearth culture. Start figuring out your relationship with the gods, your relationship with your ancestors, how you do things. And take your time. Enjoy it. Don't rush. It's fine. It'll happen. Most things in heathenry happen organically over time. So take your time. Don't feel rushed, and just roll with it. And I think you will find that things will turn out to your benefit. So that's enough for today, guys. We'll come back to this in the future because I'm sure this is going to spawn a bunch of questions, and people are going to want info and, hey, what do you do with this? Hey, what do you do with that? Great question I had the other day was, what do I do with my offerings when I'm done with them, especially if I live in an apartment complex kind of thing. I'm going to come back and do some more on that, okay? So that's a future video that we'll come back to. It's on my list of video ideas. So I'm going to come back to that one, so don't feel bad that we didn't get to that in this particular video. I'll come back to it. There's a lot of intro stuff that we can do. I like to intersperse some intro things with some of my more advanced stuff. Like we just did the 3 generational rule last week, and this is... it's nice to jump in and do some intro stuff for intro heathens and be like, okay, you need this too, all right? I can't just talk to the established heathens, and I can't just talk to the intro heathens. I got to kind of mesh back and forth. So to you established heathens, thank you for putting up with this. If you've seen it this far, most of you have probably already clicked off by now because it's like, I know all this, which is fine. It's cool. That's not the target audience for this particular video, so I get it. It's cool. And I'm sure the analytics will prove that when I go to look at the numbers for these videos. Anyway, hit me up with questions, with comments. I will get to them as I can. Keep in mind, things are just stupid busy for me right now. They have been for like a year now. I don't know if that's going to let up anytime soon. I'm not holding my breath, but if they do let up some, then I'll be able to feedback some more. I've got some stuff that I've promised out on email that I'm coming back to. I've not forgotten you guys. I keep those marked as new in my email so that I can come back to them. I just never think about it when I'm in front of the right source material to do what I need to do for it. I always think about it at the wrong time, and I'm like, I need to come back to that. So anyway, I'll get to you, all right? I will. It may be months late, but I'll get to you. I'm not going to do your research for you, though, guys. I'm not. I'll put my videos out on how I see things and stuff, but I'm not going to go and like dig out specific source materials for you. So don't bother hitting me up with, hey, do you have sources on this? Do you have sources? Look, I'm doing my own stuff. I don't have time to necessarily go and be everybody's librarian and pull forth the source material that they need for this. I will tell you, go check your Eddas, check your sagas, check this, check that. And I may make a recommendation of, like, if you're interested in afterlife stuff, go read The Road to Hell by H.R. Ellis Davidson, because it's an amazing source and I highly recommend it. But I'm not going to go do the research for you, okay? You're going to have to dig it up. So thank you all. I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you for sticking with the video this long. Thank you for watching these, and thank you for the feedback. Hail to you all. May your hearth fires burn bright. We're going to try for another one here. Hopefully the wind isn't too maxing my microphone out, because the weather is kind of ridiculous, but I don't want to waste an hour's worth of footage simply because of the wind, you know? Yeah, I know I'm blocking the camera, but need to adjust a little bit. All right, so I'm going to jump into another video. Hopefully. I'm running on empty. 7 days a week. I'm on day 70 now, I think. 70, 71, something like that. It's ridiculous. It's just nature of the business. You do what you do. Keep rolling. So anyway, yeah. There may not be a whole lot of monologue on this one. We may just go ahead and jump into it. Another one of those viewer requests that I don't remember who initially requested it, and several people have requested it since then. So, let's go. And we're live in 3, 2, 1. Let's jam.